we're going to move on and we're going to do some starbursts, and we're going to have a go at wobbly lines, which are not as easy as you think when you want wobbly lines. We're going to do a whole collection of things. So starburst, you start with a spiral. Now when you do a spiral, it is really important that you're doing it in a single movement with the machine. If you're trying to be clever and think that by moving your fabric around in a spiral, it won't actually work, and what you'll get is hard lines. So it's really important that you're actually moving your fabric in that spiral when you start. And here we're going to have a go at a sort of a sunburst. So we're going here, we're going to start, and we're just going to bring it out. We don't need to do loads, and we want to stop somewhere at the top. And we're going to come out, and we're just going to do some lines, but we don't want them too thick and we don't want them too thin. Out and in, just a slight kink in your lines. You have to be careful, because if you don't think about how you're going to do them, then what you'll end up with is something that looks like a Catherine wheel. I'll show you what I mean in a moment, where all the lines start to bend in one direction. So all you're going to do is that, but if you don't think about it, then actually what you can end up with is something like this. So they all start to bend over, and you don't want that effect. Well, you might want that effect, but for this purpose we don't. Okay, once you've done that, that's it for the centre of a block. So you might want to just do that on a smaller piece as a practice, because it's mainly to sort of get that shape. Okay, what we next do is some lines that customers, I think it was one of our customers, Jill, who christened this as ladies' legs years ago, and then it kind of stuck. So I'm going to sort of like shorten this so it's your block. Remember that your blocks are oversized. They are larger than you want them to be, because you're going to trim them down, and this is one where you're going to use those outsides of the block to move around. So we're going to start in the top left hand corner, and we're going to come down with a slightly wobbly line. We're going to do what look like talons coming down, or stalactites, depending on what you want to do. And we're just going to bring those down all across the block, okay, right the way through. Then you're going to use the very outside of your block to come down to the bottom, and you're going to do some that actually come up in between. Now that on itself can actually look quite effective if you're doing, you know, if you like doing sort of quilts with scenes on them and that. These will look like trees, or they can actually look like water, depending on which way around you do it. One of the things that you do again in terms of learning to move around your fabric is that you can then actually fill the lines. Now somebody once did this, and they decided to do all of their lines first in the way that I've just drawn, and then when they went to fill in some of the things, they actually filled in the opposite part to what they'd originally intended. But what you get still is quite a good effect. So if you use this to travel around edge of the block, coming in, and then you're moving, you need to skip over the top. You don't want to come down. So here you might decide to carry on down to begin with, bring it around the bottom, creep up here, and then go from side to side to fill these areas. But what you get is quite an effective design going across, and it's filling these areas. You'll see I'm going to go right the way down again. And what you start to see, and depending on the angle that this is on our camera, I guess, you'll see different effects. It can actually look like trees. I'm just filling in all of these areas. And so on. Okay, so you can see that one there. Now if I do this a different way on the next one, I'm going to come down and up. This time I'm just going to shadow, coming across and in, across, in, across, in. Okay, Now I'm going to bring my next one down. This one I'm going to fill with pebbles. So it's a way of practicing your fillers, so you can actually get a sense of how you could fill parts on a quilt. And you'll notice this time I'm actually filling the talons, stalagmites or whatever they're called. So here I'm putting in pebbles. As I get to the bottom, I'll use that side to travel up as close as I can on the line. I'm using the top of the block that will be trimmed away to move along, and I'm coming down again. This time I'm going to fill with mussel shells. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. I'm going to use that to move down. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. I'll travel back up to the top, and I'm going to just sneak one in over here. 1, 2, 3. Long. I'm going to come in, but you get the idea. Here you could go from side to side. You do another one and fill it with spirelli. Again, thinking jigsaws. Having trouble with my pen, so I'm going to get another pen, and there, and so on. And then you would do the opposite in the way and fill it again with various fillers as you chose. Okay, so the last one I'm going to show you in this session is actually bark, and one of the things that you'll find sort of the fiddliest to do is the paperclip shape. So we're looking at a paperclip like this. If you imagine that it's opened and it comes up, that's the shape we're looking at. So down, doesn't matter which way round you draw it, it can be that way, but that's what we're looking at. So we're coming down with a line first of all, and I'm going to put a line here so I'm not travelling too far. So line, sort of slight wobble on it, doesn't have to be straight, because what we're doing is creating a bark effect. So this is great for trees and things like this. So now I'm coming up and I'm going to add my paper clip. Try not to make it too round. I'm travelling back round. Now what I'm doing this time is I'm coming up through here. Now I'm going to come back down and fill with some wobbly lines. I'm using the excess fabric in my block to travel around, and I'm going to come down. I'm just going to loop around there, and I'm going to go up and I'm going to go down. Now I'm going to put in another knot, because that's in effect what we're creating. So here and round again, and down and up, along through the top. Don't have to go in around that, so this time I'm going to fill that in as a gap. And round and up. I don't want all my knots in the same place. It'd be a really bad bit of wood if you had a line of knots. Probably reject it. My Uncle Jack, who was a carpenter, was very offended by knots and said you had to treat them properly. And when we walked behind my dad's coffin in the churchyard, we noticed a knot that we knew our Uncle Jack would spot as soon as the coffin passed him, and he did, but it tickled us. They say you laugh at funerals. So we're going up and down, up and down. So here we go again, up. And it's just a nice sort of, it's quite a satisfying design. It takes a while to master it, but once you do, it's very pleasing to use. And again, if you like creating scenery and things like that, you can add that to trees. Okay, Another way that you can do trees, of course, is if you imagine that you have a line of trees, and you may well have added these in fabric as a applique or something, and you just want to stitch them over the top. Free motion is going to be your easiest method. In fact, you'll use free motion to do more than you think. This is where free motion and machine embroidery cross over. So to attach these, I'll use a different colour so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to free motion down on the side, and then I'm just going to scribble across every so often a line, and you just sort of do a rough effect. It's obviously going to be finer when you're doing it on the machine, and a few on the other side as well. So you're attaching your applique, but you're also adding some effects, and this could be a silver birch, so you could use a grey fabric and just overstitch in black or white or whatever. So again, you'd come down, little lines going across, some you might carry right across. You're just kind of like creating a slight wobble, an effect, and that gives you that different effect. And I think that is where we finish this session. Nobody's barked every time I've mentioned bark, so that's good. So I haven't got an outtake for you today. So remember, paper clip. Okay, thank you. This is our spiral and wobbly lines, and we all think that we'll do wobbly lines really easily, and then when we try to, it's quite difficult. And this is the spiral where I was telling you that you need to make sure that you're doing that in a single movement on the machine rather than trying to turn your fabric. This is my sort of lady's legs, and you'll see that if you put it one way, it can actually look like a landscape, you know, running through hills. It could be a river running through, so you could follow that through. And this way round, it can actually look like trees sort of thing, so that's quite good. And this is an example here of you filling in those areas with some of the filler stitches, so it gives you a practice, and it also helps you to scale them down a bit. Here, more wobbly lines. There's our paperclip shape. You have to get used to the fact that everything you're seeing is in reverse to what I'm seeing, so it kind of confuses me very slightly, but you can see the bark effect. This is where I was demonstrating how you could create things like silver birch or something, and this is your paper clips.